Right now at 5:30, an Eyewitness News exclusive. State leaders shut down housing courts because of safety concerns tied to the pandemic.
But some lawyers and some landlords say the decision has created an explosive combination that is costing landlords some very big bucks. Channel 3 Eyewitness News reporter Roger Suzanen explains.
It's another beautiful beach day in Westbrook, and the family that lives at 438 Seaside Avenue is in a great spot to enjoy it, just steps away from the surf and sand. And the best part? Their rent is effectively zero. You see, the folks who live here told their landlord they're simply not paying.
He's told me outright, because he's done this so many times before, he says, I'm staying here until the sheriff comes to take me out. Because he knows that he can stay there that long. The laws protect him.
Jeffrey Dunn owns 438 Seaside, which is just one house back from the beach. Dunn owns the home right on the water, too, 440 Seaside, but says he skipped most weekends this summer because the situation with his current tenants is simply too painful.
It's gut-wrenching to come here because it's just the emotion it takes on my wife is devastating.
Back in November, Dunn rented the home to Robert and Faith Mara for $1,400 a month. He did not do an extensive background check, a mistake he now regrets.
I went with my gut and I just rented it to them because they seemed like nice folks, okay? So that was the wrong thing to do.
Court records show that last year alone, the Maras were evicted from 2 different Westbrook homes after their landlord said they just stopped paying rent. They got the boot from the first house in February of 2019, and by April, a second landlord took them to court. They were evicted from that house by October, and a short time later, they moved into Dunn's home. He says they announced they weren't going to pay him rent in January, long before the pandemic began.
I don't know how anybody could be like this. I've never met people that could do something like this.
Even worse, the Mora's 6-month lease ended in May, but nearly 5 months later, they're still here, which forced Dunn to cancel all of his summer rentals at nearly $2,000 a week. He says now the Moras refuse to leave, pay rent, or even answer the door. When we knocked, at least 3 people were inside, but they didn't come out to greet us. So how is this allowed to happen? The answer is tied to COVID-19.
6 months now the courts have been closed.
Dunn's attorney, Yona Gregory, who represents hundreds of Connecticut landlords, says the state's housing court shut down in mid-March due to the pandemic and remained completely closed for more than half a year.
Landlords and tenants are basically having to fend for themselves out here with laws but no court.
Within the last few weeks, the housing court began scheduling some virtual hearings, but no in-person hearings. And last week, the governor announced an extension of the eviction moratorium, which ensures that tenants won't be evicted until at least January 1st of 2021, except in extreme circumstances, which Gregory says Dunn's situation somehow doesn't qualify for.
This is an issue where the court has just abandoned the landlord and made him unable to remove these people, and the hardship is just unbelievable.
Gregory says the eviction moratorium and housing court closure means hundreds of landlords who tried to start eviction proceedings before the pandemic are still waiting, and tensions can escalate.
Emotions are running high. There's no court for these people to resolve any disputes, and they're left to just fend for themselves, and it's a very dangerous situation, I believe.
Back on Seaside Avenue, Dunn is in no mood to enjoy this beautiful beach day. He says he's lost more than $40,000, and sadly, he knows that his tenants won't be going anywhere anytime soon.
Yesterday I was out weeding the driveway, and she stuck her head out the window and said, "Get off of my property. Get off of my property."
Roger Suzanen, Channel 3 Eyewitness News.
Now, today we received a phone call from the couple in the house. They claim that they gave their entire stimulus check to the landlord. The Moras also claim the landlord told the couple he was going to use that money for other things like the electric bill and, quote, something else. They also claim the landlord increased the rent to $1,800 overnight without any notice, and that they offered to pay him in increments, and he refused.
But the Dunn's attorney says none of those claims are accurate. Yona Gregory tells Eyewitness News that although the Moras did send over a check for more than $500 in June, that only covered utility fees that they owed. And the Moras still owe the Dunns more than $40,000. Gregory also says the Dunns never raised the Moras' rent during the period that covered their signed lease agreement, although the Dunns do charge more to rent their home in the summertime, which was after that lease expired.